This episode of Us and Them is supported with a grant from the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation.
Hi, it's Trey Kay, and from PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting, this is Us and Them, the show that tells the stories about the things that divide us. Religion and politics are two of the biggest divides in life for some people. Differences over faith and church attendance can split families. This year, even whether to attend worship services in person has tested some people's faith. The pandemic closed the doors on many churches, temples, and mosques. Crowd restrictions and stay-at-home orders mean people practice their faith at home through video link. For pastors, priests, imams, and rabbis, COVID has become part of the service.
How do you preach about COVID? Have you incorporated it in your sermons?
Oh, yeah, almost every week.
It's a recognition of mortality, of our finitude. And I think finding ways to live in that recognition without being terrified by it is what religious communities have always been about.
Do you think that the pandemic has strengthened or weakened people's faith?
No, I think it's strengthened the people's faith. There's no doubt in my mind.
This is the time of year when we take comfort from traditional celebrations with family and friends. Many of those traditions have their roots in religion. Christians celebrate the birth of Jesus, Jews light the menorah. Many Black Americans observe the rites of Kwanzaa. But this year, because of COVID-19, we've had tough decisions to make about how or even whether to gather.
The issue isn't how to stay connected, but will you stay connected?
That's Reverend James Ely, and he's asking, will you stay connected to God? Faith leaders are worried about that. They are searching for ways to keep their followers connected to God or whatever is central to their beliefs. But when people are forced apart, does that shake their faith? It turns out the pandemic is redefining belief for many. They're finding ways to express their beliefs that are not centered on a physical location, but rather in the virtual realm. These fresh approaches to spirituality may leave a lasting legacy. For many, it's a dark, holy, and hopeful time of year. A good time to take stock of where we are and what we've learned.
We want you to sing. We want you to participate in worship. We do ask that you keep your mask on.
It's the Sunday 9 a.m. service at Bible Center Church in Charleston, West Virginia.
Again, we're so glad that you're here with us this morning, and we're so glad to have those of you who are joining us online as well.
Parishioners take their seats, not in pews, but in chairs. They're arranged in clusters to accommodate social distancing.
Well, that's a great song. Thank you, guys. Well, welcome. Good to have you here at Bible Center this morning, and good to have all of you who are joining us online. This is a great way for us to connect with one another each week. Here at Bible Center, we want to make sure that you feel connected at whatever stage and whatever level you're ready to connect back with Bible Center. We've got lots of different ways that people...
My name is Matt Friend. I'm the lead pastor at Bible Center Church.
I remember as a teenager attending Bible Center Church when it was located along the Kanawha River in downtown Charleston, West Virginia. The congregation has grown exponentially over the past several decades, and the church is now situated in a large building on a sprawling 88-acre campus just outside of town. When the pandemic hit, everything about their operation was revamped.
it has drastically changed the way we not only do ministry, but it's caused us to question pretty much everything about ministry. All of our training was how to get people in the seats, how to keep them in the seats. And so we're just having to rewire our thinking to this person submitting a prayer request to one of our pastors online on a Tuesday and engaging with them in a 20-minute chat is just as valuable to the kingdom as them sitting in a seat, at 9 a.m. on a Sunday. So we're just having to rewire our thinking. I mean, even when you ask that, it's hard for me to answer because I want people in the seats, but I'm realizing that if they're at home, they're engaged in our services, they're engaged in our online groups, they're chatting, submitting prayer requests, growing in their faith, then it's a win. The goal is discipleship, not attendance.
Pastor Friend works with a council of elders to make decisions about how to hold services safely. They've added services, which means fewer people at each one. Over the summer, they hired an online pastor who holds regular online services and study groups and takes prayer requests via chat. Matt Friend says their main auditorium is now as much video studio as chapel. And since COVID, more of their services are broadcast on TV.
Are there any of the adaptations that you personally or that Bible Center has deployed that you think you'll keep after the pandemic passes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I get chills when you ask me that. We've tried to transition now. I think God has transitioned us from being a church who just tries to do church. But of course, we're now trying to be the church, but we're looking for ways to, I guess you could say, not be served, but to serve. We realize that God's placed us here to serve our city. So, for instance, we've started what's called the Maker Center in downtown Charleston, and several folks donated 3D printers. And so we've now printed over 2,000 separate pieces of PPE through our 3D printers.
PPE is the protective gear for frontline workers. Through the Maker Center, Bible Center Church now provides masks and gowns for doctors and nurses and for teachers and students. And Bible Center helps at recovery centers around Charleston, leading worship services and preparing meals. When people ask Pastor Friend why God would let COVID happen, this is what he says.
God purifies his people through pain. That's just the way he's always worked. But if there is a byproduct to suffering somewhere down on the list, we do believe that God has made us better and he's drawing people to himself through it.
Has the pandemic affected your faith?
Oh boy, I mean, that's a good question. I think the pandemic has tried my faith for sure, if that's what we mean by affected. It has just caused me to have to rely on the scriptures, have to rely on the Spirit, have to rely on community. I've seen my own need for community. I didn't realize how much I need it as a pastor. But yeah, this pandemic has shown me the need for my own community, that I'm not just a pastor, but that I'm a person.
At this time, we're going to enjoy communion. So I would invite you to get out your communion packet. Again, if you were able to slip in without picking up your packet.
One of the more innovative changes at Bible Center is the way the church offers communion. When they walk in, parishioners pick up an individual foiled packet that contains a tiny cracker and some juice in a separate compartment.
Let me invite you now to take a moment, and when you're ready, let's take the bread and remember Christ's broken body for us.
Matt Friend says the pandemic has taught him another lesson that he's passed on to his congregation. Hunkering down has helped remind him of what's truly important.
How basic life is. Life really is about getting up and eating breakfast and loving the people around you and getting kids off to school and packing lunches the next evening and doing homework and catching a half hour of TV and going to bed. Life is so basic. And I think we've all just been reminded of it through this pandemic. So yeah, if we could all just come to terms with the beautiful life that God has given us. There is so many beautiful things to accept if we'll just take the time to look at it.
What I've noticed is the resiliency of human beings, the creativity, and the ability for us to become in crazy settings normal again.
That's Rabbi Victor Urecki of the B'nai Jacob Synagogue in Charleston. We talked last spring right after West Virginia's stay-at-home order. The synagogue was working to bring Torah study online. Rabbi Urecki thought it was a terrible idea because personal connection and ritual are essential to the practice of Judaism. But soon he realized he was wrong.
We are forgetting what the stories are really all about and what they're teaching us. If we're just worrying about the rituals, if we're just worrying about the fact that we need to be at church for Easter, or we need to have a Seder exactly the way we've always had it, then I think we're not seeing the entire picture.
The Seder meal is when Jewish people tell the story of how Pharaoh enslaved them and Moses liberated them.
From the story of the Exodus, it's a story about a people who, if you will, were hunkered down in Egypt. And here was the 10th plague was about to hit, and they were hiding in their homes because the angel of death was passing over them. The story, far from being suppressed because of what is happening now, is actually becoming more enhanced. We recognize what it is to be hunkered down. We recognize the idea of being vulnerable. And we also recognize the hope that we're going to emerge from this better than ever. There is a dawn after the night.
So, just as Pastor Friend has learned to appreciate the beauty of everyday life, Rabbi Urecki is reminded that rituals may change, but stories endure.
In the early days of the pandemic, how did your life change?
Tremendously, like everybody else's.
Ibtisam Barazi is on the executive committee of the Islamic Association of West Virginia. She helps lead the West Virginia Refugee Interfaith Ministry.
First thing we did when the state and the nation was under lockdown, we closed the Islamic Center. There were no prayers, no gathering, nothing. And that was very difficult for all of us because the Islamic Center served as a center for us, as a community.
Ibtisam moved to Charleston in 1975. She's originally from war-torn Syria, where she still has family. Her husband is an electrical engineer who taught at a local university and worked in the chemical industry. The two of them were among the few dozen founding families of the Islamic Center. Ibtisam worked for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and their 3 children grew up in Charleston.
What people need to understand, we as immigrants do not have family here. I don't have any brothers or sisters. I'm one of 8, but I don't have anybody here in the state. So these people who come from your country, your city, your town becomes like a family to you because we've been together 20, 30 years. So we gather at the Islamic Center to celebrate holidays, to pray together, to attend classes, or maybe just to celebrate somebody's birthday or to socialize, normal things.
In Islam, the most important holiday is the month of Ramadan, when Muslims fast, pray, and reflect from sunup to sundown. This year, Ramadan came about a month after the pandemic hit, and the president declared a national health emergency.
So each day of celebrating Ramadan ends with an iftar meal. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Normally, the iftar meal itself, it's a celebration. It's a celebration of breaking your fast that you were able to make it to that point. But it's also a time where we really go overboard most of the time by having so much food, so much variety of food, because we have friends and family together. Well, when you are doing it by yourself, I'll be honest with you, I did not go out of my way to do a variety of stuff because it was just me and my husband, I made so many trays. I made desserts. I put them in separate trays and I put them in a foil, and I wrote on the cards, because we couldn't share iftar meal with you, I want you to have a little taste of Ramadan. And I made them personally. I took those and drove to each member and gave it to them. And I can even show you a picture of them.
Ibtisam holds her phone up to the computer. And there she is with a tray of individually wrapped sweets. She says she cried from loneliness many times during the month of Ramadan, and especially missed her children and grandchildren. The mosque adheres to all public health guidelines and is open when local COVID conditions allow. The imam leads prayers 5 times a day. But instead of kneeling shoulder to shoulder, worshipers are socially distanced and wear masks. Because Ibtisam is a cancer survivor with a compromised immune system, she doesn't attend.
And I personally have not been there, neither have my husband since the pandemic.
And how does that feel?
Not good. Very sad, actually. I miss it a lot, actually. You know, my heart cries out every time I pass the place because I have to follow the rules. I am the vice president. It says if you have a compromised system, you do not come in. Of course, I will follow the rule. I won't come in.
Do you think that the pandemic has strengthened or weakened people's faith?
No, I think it's strengthened the people's faith. There's no doubt in my mind, because it is a message that we were told from various sources and from your own, that now is the time to rely on your faith to give you strength and to give you patience and to give you believe that the Lord, there is a purpose behind anything that happens. And we as Muslims believe that.
Ibtisam Barazi, Victor Urecki, and Matt Friend are all leaders of 3 different faith traditions. So it was striking to me just how much their experiences are the same. They have each felt lonely and sad since COVID-19 shut things down. Their communities have had to adjust, but they all say their faith is stronger because it's been tested by the pandemic. Faith leaders say there's a reason so many of them feel this way. It's because they've had to create something new, fresh opportunities for followers to practice their faith.
There's a creativity, there's a collaboration, there's a participation, and human beings long for that.
Mary Hess is a professor of educational leadership at Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota. She's the only Roman Catholic on a faculty that prepares people for Christian ministry. She specializes in how media can enrich faith. When the pandemic hit, Professor Hess was as prepared as anyone could be. In fact, she saw the pandemic as an opportunity for people to dig deeper into what God means in their lives.
I think a lot of people's sense of what religion is not maybe what actually matters the most. And so as they struggle to figure out what that is now, new things are opening up, new possibilities, new ways in which religious language, for instance, religious stories matter differently, enter into our imagination more powerfully. And this is where the Bible is so powerful, right? Ancient sacred processes are powerful precisely because they've persisted across centuries. We will sometimes talk about the ancient and the future practice, right? That we are part of this community of people that have traveled through time. I mean, that's one of the things about being in a religious tradition, regardless of which tradition you're in, this relationship with transcendence and this relationship with life that goes across the boundaries of death and life.
How has the pandemic impacted you?
Oh, gosh. That's a really good question. Well, it's everything. I do all of my teaching in this screen, in this computer, in Zoom. What religious education is these days, right? The field, the really thoughtful part of it, is accompanying people in their daily lives and helping them think through how to make sense of their daily lives with an awareness of the awe and wonder, and with the ability to hear God in their lives, right? To see God's action in the world, to have hope in the middle of despair. And that's the kind of work that, okay, I'm Christian, so I think about God as incarnate through Jesus Christ, right? So embodied in flesh, which means that physical touch and practice, all of those things are really important. And so now
you're disconnected from that.
Well, I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to do it anyway, right? There's a embodied form of the Lord's Prayer that I try to teach my students via Zoom, right? So like I stand back so they can see me in whole, and they have to have room in their space so that they can move around, and we try to do that.
Wait. Can you do that for me? Can you show me that?
I can do parts of it, yeah. Well, you have to see me. And if you think about the Lord's Prayer, if you just start, Our Father, who art in heaven, right? So you imagine reaching up, engaging all that you see as you stretch up and your arms stretch out and your head goes back, right? Hallowed be thy name. And so you put your hands one over the other and over your mouth as a way of honoring your mouth, right? So Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Then if you put your hands, I don't know if you can see this, you put your hands down at the side and let your head fall. Thy will be done. Do you see how the embodiness of that, like turning your head down and putting your arms down, that is a way of physically saying, thy will be done.
Professor Hess is figuring out how to teach her own classes and how to advise individual ministers pursuing advanced degrees. She's collected inspiring stories and a few discouraging ones.
A handful of them told me that their church councils had told them they were cutting their pay in half because they were not worshiping in person. So they weren't somehow doing as much work. And it's the opposite, right? Like pastor leaders who are being creative in this world right now are doing twice as much work.
Professor Hess says she knows some pastors who are innovating, like a Colorado preacher who records video greetings from parishioners' front yards and uploads them for all to see and share. Other pastors call people on the phone while they both take a walk outside. Mary Hess's own Catholic parish no longer meets in person, but on Zoom.
And what was interesting about gathering in Zoom is you see each other's faces. When you're in our usual church building, everybody's facing forward, and you may turn around and say hi to somebody, but you basically only see the faces of the people immediately around you. In Zoom, all of a sudden, you can see everybody's faces. You build a different kind of relationship. So it's not the same, but it doesn't have to be worse.
In fact, Professor Hess sees an opportunity for progress. COVID reminds us we are mortal and vulnerable. That realization makes us focus on what is really important.
So my hope is that this pandemic and the rush to digital tech will help us to see what's been problematic about some of our religious practices, and will help lift up some of the things that remain strong and life-giving and offering hope to people. I think part of what we're learning in this is what matters most to us. And churches, synagogues, mosques will come out of this with a focus on what matters most to people and letting go of some of the things that they probably should have let go of quite a long time ago. What do we really care about here? What do we really want to say about who God is? So when the norms shift, how do we help people see that they can still believe in God, they can still believe in religious practice? It's just they're transforming, and that's what this chaos of COVID has done to churches. It's tossed out all the assumptions and default practices and everything else, and now people are trying to figure out what really matters. How do we really connect?
Connecting in new ways helps some people continue to find comfort and support. After a break, we'll hear how some people who rely on old-fashioned church are managing without it.
For me, church is important because it's kind of really the only place where I truly, truly feel connected with my faith and with God.
You're listening to Us and Them. This program is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council and the CRC Foundation. This episode is supported with a grant from the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation.
In difficult times, music gives us peace, brings us together, and helps heal us. It calms our nerves and brightens our days. That's why we're bringing you classic episodes of Mountain Stage on air and in our podcast. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find something that's familiar or brand new and feel the power of live music on our website, mountainstage.org.
Hey, it's Trey, and this is Us and Them from West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX. For many of us, December is a time to celebrate the holidays with family and friends. Holidays comes from holy days, the faith-based traditions that many people observe. This year, lots of traditions have been upended because of the pandemic. But how does COVID affect what people believe and how they acknowledge their spirituality?
My name is Diane Winston. I hold the Knight Chair in Media and Religion at the Annenberg School for Journalism and Communication at the University of Southern California.
Like so many other teachers, Professor Winston had to take her classes online after spring break.
People often think of academics living in their heads, but it's been brought back to me with great force that we are physical entities, and being in a space with each other is so very important, even in teaching, especially in teaching, because there are so many bodily cues I get from students that I cannot get on Zoom.
Professor Winston studies religion in society, how faith appears in popular culture. She says movies and television are good places to look for society's spiritual values.
The vehicle for religious teaching is storytelling, right? The Bible is stories. The Bhagavad Gita is stories. The Quran is stories. Storytelling becomes a form of religion. It becomes a way we learn how to behave in the world and treat others. And the biggest storyteller we have is television.
Professor Winston's undergraduate students observe how religion is represented in television programs. Then they discuss their observations in class. Well, that's how they were doing it until the pandemic hit. That's when Diane Winston knew she needed to change things to make her classes work better online, and to ask her students deeper questions about how they were connecting with their spirituality during the pandemic. She thought it over and then developed a new strategy.
So I asked them to create a playlist of songs that had spiritual resonance for them during the pandemic. Kanye was on almost everyone's playlist because he has so many songs that have religion in them that you could have done a whole playlist on Kanye. I had them write about why they chose different songs, and their reasons were beautiful. I mean, they really talked about their pain, their confusion, their anger, their depression, but also about their joy and their happiness. And a number of them have written to me since that class ended and said, I love listening to our playlists. I get a lot of happiness just hearing that music.
I asked Professor Winston if her students would talk to us. I wanted to hear their playlists and wanted to know how the pandemic is changing the way they think about God. We talked with 3 students who all described themselves as deeply religious. They had all been regular churchgoers. When they had to stop because of COVID, they felt alone.
It affected my faith because I realized how dependent I was on church, actually.
Sophia Quinones is 19, and she took Diane Winston's religion class last spring. Sophia didn't go to church much at college. She moved back home and hasn't attended in-person services during the pandemic. She wonders if her devotion to God has taken a hit.
Maybe I'm not as in tune with my relationship with God as I thought I was because I'm not around a church community.
What is it that you like about going to church?
That's a good question. For me, going to church is kind of my way of knowing that things are going to be okay in a sense. Church is important because it's kind of really the only place where I truly, truly feel connected with my faith. We all go through stuff in our life, but we all kind of come together in like unity and praise God. And there's something that's really beautiful to me about that.
Sophia grew up in the Catholic Church, but her aunt was Pentecostal, and sometimes her family went to her church. Sophia felt closer to God through the praise songs and less formal rituals of the Pentecostal services. Sophia's family switched churches when she was in high school. It was during a tough time when her mother was treated for breast cancer.
As a family, we were in a place where we were thinking the worst. We were thinking there is a possibility that my mother could not make it. And so I just remember it kind of started with my father and my mom, who kind of just made a decision just off the bat that we were going to go to church every single Sunday, that we were going to like put all of our faith in God to save my mom, in a sense, to cure her. And initially I was thinking, like, what's that going to do? Like, what is church going to do? But there was just kind of a sudden shift in the relationship that we all had with each other once we started going to church. And we found that kind of a sense of peace in a way. For some reason, my mom was getting better as we were going to church so often. And my mom is better today because God helped her through it. And that's what we believe.
When Sophia moved back home last spring and shifted to virtual classes, she and her family tried attending church online. But for them, it just wasn't the same.
They were trying to make it as normal as possible.
Right.
And that's really nice but it's kind of like online school too. Like I felt like I wasn't learning as much too online because it's harder to pay attention because you were just looking at a screen. There's this thing about being online all day, I think, that you're like, oh, another Zoom meeting.
Online church didn't work for Sophia. She was already spending too many hours a day on screen doing classes and homework. So when Professor Winston made the playlist assignment, Sophia was not just relieved, she was happy to do it.
I put a lot of songs that I listened to as a child, as a kid, that kind of had a new meaning to me.
Well, give me an example of something you listened to as a kid that had a new meaning to you.
Yeah, so for me it was Jesus Take the Wheel by Carrie Underwood.
Can you sing a little bit for me right now?
I think it starts with, we were going last Friday on our way to Cincinnati on a snow-white Christmas Eve. Going home to see your mama and a daddy with the baby in the backseat. And then it goes like, the chorus goes, Jesus, take the wheel, take it from my hand, and I can't do this on my own. Jesus, take the wheel, take it from my hands, 'cause I can't do this on my own. So it's a song about kind of just putting your faith in Jesus in that exact moment of crisis and kind of hopelessness.
I don't think that I've ever experienced something where everybody in the world, the President of the United States, all of the leaders across the country, like in many ways they seemed powerless over this thing. Here's a situation where you, a freshman, were kind of feeling the type of powerlessness that the whole world was feeling in a way.
Exactly, yeah. And I think this assignment and being able to think about that song in a new way was a way for me to express that,
Yeah.
I was really using it as kind of like a reflection, more so than an assignment that I had to turn in for a grade. I was using it as I was able to listen to this song that kind of gave me hope and was maybe even helping me through this time.
Sophia Quinones and the other students I talked to say the playlist assignment was helpful. even inspiring. It helped them think differently about the role religion plays in their lives. But I wondered, what are the potential consequences of all this for organized religion? What happens if folks like Sophia drop out of congregational life and figure out how to stay connected with God on their own? Diane Winston says it could change things.
This is going to precipitate the reorganization of religious bodies in, I think, a very large way. I think things will become more locally based. There'll be less from denominational headquarters down.
Mostly, Professor Winston sees this as a good thing. Remote worship has made many people more curious about faith and let them sample what other congregations are doing.
I've spoken to a lot of people who've been service jumping, whether it's a friend of mine who said she was going back and forth between 6 services on Yom Kippur, or a student of mine who was always, uncomfortable with religion, but decided to drop in at Pentecostal and evangelical churches to see what they had to say. It's allowed people to experience religion without making a big commitment.
Professor Winston says she's as tired of Zoom as anyone else. But it has helped her realize a few things. Families can gather virtually to celebrate religious holidays when they can't be together. And she says in some ways, virtual services help you not sweat the small stuff.
In the privacy of my home with my husband, I was able to focus spiritually on what was going on without the distractions of who's wearing what and did he say hello to me and why aren't I speaking publicly, and all the little distractions that kind of tear me away from being spiritually focused.
Diane Winston is drawn to the stories that have sustained Jewish people and other faith traditions for centuries. Stories about a merciful God and a world of opportunity.
It's not so much, we need someone to tell us what to do. We need something to believe in. We need something bigger than ourselves, and we need a sign of hope.
If you look up the word religion, you'll find its root in the Latin verb religare. It means to bind. Some scholars say it's the bond between humans and God. Others say it's the bond humans have with each other. Churches, mosques, and temples express a range of beliefs. But one common denominator that dates back to ancient times is what many people know as the Golden Rule. Treat people the way you want them to treat you. Organized religion reminds many of the values they share, even when those values are expressed through different rituals. For many people, faith means that God has their back, and faith can be a powerful force for good.
I just want to do God's will. Come on and pray with us if you will. Our Father and our God, we thank you. Get Eli out of the way that you might be able to speak through me to these your people that have come to hear a word from above.
Online services have become routine at the New Life Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church in Charleston, West Virginia. Reverend James Ely is the longtime pastor.
Lord, we love you, we praise you, and we give you the glory for all things. We thank you. The first Sunday that, they declared this big epidemic, I'm going to be honest with you, I was one of the ones that did not really believe it could be that bad.
You were a little skeptical at first.
I was a little skeptical, about this. But what changed my mind in just a week's time was how all the other things shut down, all the money-making things, the sports, all of that kind of thing. When those people shut down, I said, well, shucks. They believe it, and their gods, if you will, appear to be the almighty dollar. And so if they're going to shut down and all, then there might be some kind of truth to this.
So, shut it down he did, the third Sunday in March. His son helped him get onto Zoom, and Reverend Ely hasn't missed a Sunday since.
Before the pandemic, how much did you use computer technology, the internet?
None at all. In fact, that probably entered into every sermon that I preached. Get off Facebook, stop putting your personal business out there and then being angry with someone because they were commenting on it.
So that was the message that came from many of your sermons for years before the pandemic, sir. Right? You were the get off Facebook preacher.
Reverend Ely knows everyone in his congregation. He probably knows their parents, too. A retired Army man, he started his ministry 23 years ago because he saw his community on Charleston's west side suffering from the violence that came from widespread drug dealing.
I would say 70% of my congregation are ex-offenders. And so we've pulled them in out of the streets and all. And so for that reason, some of them might not be as grounded as we would want them to be. Most of the ones that we brought in from the streets, they had been incarcerated at one time or another. They did not believe that they fit in the church. So that was one big thing that we had to overcome, and just making them understand this was a place for them. Nobody was going to look down on them or make them seem inferior, that they didn't belong. And so because of that, we grew.
It seems like really what you've done in many ways is built a community.
And I really had not looked at it that way, but yeah, we do. We have our own little community of ex-offenders and what have you. Yes. And sheep beget sheep. So they will bring in other folk that have been incarcerated that they knew then. And
in many ways, what I'm hearing is that my analogy of coming to church on Sundays being kind of like, keeping yourself spiritually fit, this is really kind of crucial for many of these folks in your congregation, because in many ways, if they are disconnected from the community, they might be vulnerable to maybe getting back into a behavior that could possibly put them on the wrong side of the law.
Yes. The long answer is yes.
That's a long answer.
And again, you asked earlier, the initial question was, how has this pandemic affected my congregation? And I worry a lot, and we stay on the phone a lot and on the Zoom and all, trying to make sure we stay in touch with, I know pretty much those that are vulnerable, as you say. And so we try to keep up with them and make sure that we don't lose them. And as long as they have this association, they stay level, and upright.
Level meaning the straight and narrow.
On the straight and narrow. But without that fellowship, without those folk that are watching over you, that keep encouraging you, it's just easy to go back to where you came from.
Reverend Ely doesn't want the pandemic to isolate his parishioners. He makes sure his church and its community center serve as a hub for public health, information, and support. 3 days a week, Reverend Ely holds conference calls where people can check in for a word or a prayer. He says there are usually about 50 people on that call.
The issue isn't how to stay connected, but will you stay connected? There are just ways to do it. And so it's going to tie up some of your time. Some of them don't have Zoom. They won't get there. Some of them won't get on this conference call, whatever. Now I have to do the individual thing and call them up regularly. And even my Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday time, meet me tomorrow at the church. Haven't seen them for 3 months now because of this pandemic. So come on, let me see you, and let's do some in-person talking.
Tell me what accommodations you need to make so that you can hold services.
The first thing is you need to call on Friday by 3:00. so that we know how many people are coming and can tell you, and we've not had to do this yet, but so that we can tell you that you can't come because we're full up, we've got our capacity. Then we have on hand masks that if you don't have one, we will provide you with a mask, all the same hand sanitizer and all. But even at that on Saturday, we go through and we spray down the seats and all the building. We think that we've adequately prepared for the number of people that we have.
You said something the other day, which was like, in many ways, you weren't really exactly sure what it would be like is the way it is now, but now you really kind of like this. I think you said that you wouldn't want to go back to the way it was before.
That's a thought. And the reason for it is because there really is a whole lot less hassle involved on my part. Trying to make sure this is right for Sunday service, that is right for Sunday service. So we come up on this Zoom thing, and so all the folk that are going to join us, they join us there. It's just a whole lot less pomp and circumstance. We come on, we do what we're going to do, and we get off. We're never on here more than an hour.
Right, and you come on and you get off, and the one thing that you know is that everybody is safe.
Yes, 1,000 times, yes. That crosses my mind each week with the handful that comes to church. We just want to be sure that none of the issues that are happening around here is our fault. And if it is something that started in our house, we want to quickly get a handle on it. We must respect this thing, but we don't have to fear it.
I don't know about you, but the year 2020 has my vocabulary growing in leaps and bounds. I'm using words that I've never used before, like pandemic, disinformation, coronavirus, social distancing, fake news.
Probably the worst thing that this pandemic has done in our community is folk dying alone. Like I say, this church member that we just got out of the street and all. And so for his dear one, his very close one to die, but with nobody there, then their question is, how can God do this? Why would God do this?
What do you say when parishioners might ask that question? Why would God let this happen?
God is the only one that gives life, and he's the only one that can take life. And so I help them to understand that this coronavirus, we're talking about how it's sweeping the land and taking over people. There are causes that people die, and then there's the reason that people die. The cause is the coronavirus. It could have been a car wreck, it could have been a heart attack, any number of causes. But the only reason that you have transitioned from here is because God, for whatever reason, in his infinite wisdom, was ready for you.
I'm assuming that you say that to help comfort these folks. Do they find that message comforting?
To my understanding, all of them do. And one of the reasons they can find it comforting is because until and unless God says so, you can't die. That's just what we believe in. We've all been put here with a purpose. And so whatever your purpose is, at that moment, I believe you've accomplished it.
Great service, everyone.
Enjoyed the service. Everybody be blessed.
That was a great service, Reverend Ely. Everybody be safe.
COVID has taken people this year. And that loss forces us to find help and support and guidance. As for faith, well, I know there's something bigger than me out there, and that it's beyond my ability to control. I guess that's at the core of my belief. This year has made many of us reach out for solace in new ways. What I've experienced shows me that we all have different ways to get through it. God is there for some, a higher power that offers hope. For others, spirituality is not a religion or a house of worship. It's a way to acknowledge how big the universe is, how small we are, and how little control we have over almost everything that happens in the world. This year especially has shown us that the smallest of things, a tiny virus, can throw the world into turmoil and force us apart. But through it all, I believe that we must continue to reach out to each other as we search for new ways to push through. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our team for this show is me, Trey Kay, Lori Stern, Brad Stratton, and Kate Smith. Michael Lipton and Tristan Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. Lelena Price provides us with images for the web. The wonderful people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the West Virginia Humanities Council, and the CRC Foundation. This episode was supported with a grant from the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the Mentorship Program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. Happy New Year, and we'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.